Ladies and gents, welcome back for another Engineers Podcast. We have Antoine van der Lee here today, who's staff engineer at WeTransfer in the iOS team. Hello, mate. How are you?
That's right. Hello, I'm doing good. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Very good. Kick us off and give us a bit of a background into you and WeTransfer.
Yeah, for sure. So, I'm iOS engineer at WeTransfer for about 4.5 years right now. Quite a long time if you think about it.
Yeah.
But there's a good reason for it because I love working at WeTransfer since it's a really energetic company, which it's quite a unique company. It's Dutch. I'm Dutch too. I'm from around Amsterdam,
Yep.
which gives a connection by default. But yeah, I mean, WeTransfer is a great company. We're like, we sometimes say we develop products for creatives, by creatives, since we are creatives too in many ways. And the best thing I like is that we try to support artists in many ways, right? So by our tools like WeTransfer.com, as well as Collect and Paste and Paper, but as well by giving away almost 30% of our ads real estate to raise awareness for artists. And I think that's simply unique and such a nice message we can send throughout the company. So at WeTransfer.com, you see beautiful advertisements, which is unique in a way too. But you often also see like art from artists that we don't get any money for, but we do support artists, which I think is quite unique in this space.
Yeah, good. Tell us a little bit about that last 5 years then. And your journey through to staff engineer. Just help us understand that. That'll set the scene quite nicely.
Yeah, totally. So I think 4.5 years ago, it's funny how I joined WeTransfer actually, because I was called like 24 hours before a conference took place to replace somebody that got sick. Yeah. And while I was performing my talk there, my first conference talk, I was quite nervous. Somebody was in the audience from WeTransfer, and he asked me to come over for a coffee, and that's how it all started.
You just didn't know you were being hired?
No, I was like, oh yeah, that's fun. Let's look how the office at WeTransfer looks like. But yeah, the rest is history. It's what they say.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I joined, it was mainly WeTransfer.com. We didn't really have any other products, and Collect was just getting started. And it was kind of my responsibility to kick it off, the whole building of the mobile application together with 3 other engineers. And yeah, at that point, it was a simple table view with just text. You couldn't really name it an application in many ways. And I think 1 year later, we released the first version as WeTransfer. And we got back a lot of confused users because they expected WeTransfer.com in an application.
Right.
But yeah, it was Collect. And Collect is a different product in many ways, where I think the best explanation is that WeTransfer.com creates transfers of files.
Yeah.
But it's an immutable transfer, right? Okay. You create it, you send it forward, and that's it. Whereas in Collect, you can create a board, which is also kind of a transfer. Yeah. But it's mutable. You can share it with everybody, and those people can join you as a collaborator and add many other files to it as well.
Cool.
And that evolved over the past 4 years to being a real product of the WeTransfer suite in many ways.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about that tech environment then. So you joined, it was already starting to be formed, if you like, or product functionality being defined, built, etc. Give us an understanding of technical landscape and how maybe that's evolved as well with you being in the team and being so prominent in Collect.
Yeah, it's funny because over, I think, the first 3-4 years, we were kind of like finding out who we are as a product within WeTransfer, within the App Store in many ways. So we didn't really move that fast, I would say. We stayed consistent with 3 engineers. We were kind of our own company within the company, I would say. So we could make our own decisions, make decisions based on features and stuff. But I think the most interesting part happened this year, where we got more serious into developing both Collect as well as another recently launched an app dedicated to WeTransfer.com,
Yeah.
which is funny because it makes the distinction between what is WeTransfer.com and what is Collect, right? We really got our own place
Identity.
in the whole product suite. Exactly. So at that point, we needed more engineers because we got another application.
Yeah.
And you also don't want to rewrite the same code, right?
Yeah.
Collect adds files, sends files, download files, upload files. But the new transfer app does exactly the same. So the biggest challenge we had over the 4.5 years, I think, started this year by making all our code reusable, by moving it into so-called Swift packages using Swift Package Manager, setting up a whole modular system, separated into like a content kit, a receiving kit, all those kind of packages that are reusable.
Okay. Is the mobile ecosystem continuing to develop, helping you build better functionality and do funkier things, if you like, within the mobile space? It seems like it is developing with reusability, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I started developing apps in 2009. I think it was iOS 4.
Yeah.
It was a whole different time compared to what it is today, and that's because of tooling as well as because of languages. Swift arrived as a replacement for Objective C, whereas we also got Swift UI as a declarative language and a replacement of UIKit views. And what it means in terms of development is that Xcode provides us now a way to visualize views without building the application.
Okay.
So the productivity is going way up because you suddenly directly get feedback on what you're building.
Okay.
That's a big improvement, as well as the Swift packages that I mentioned before. At first, we were using a tool called CocoaPods, which is like an externally developed third-party tool to manage those packages. Today, we can actually use it in Xcode, the environment which we use to build apps, integrated as developed by Apple. So we got way more first-party tools, and it's only getting started. We also get Xcode Cloud, which is currently in beta as a CI replacement. You could see it as Travis or Bitrise. I think Apple is really conscious that it needs to build a better development environment for mobile engineers, as it will make it easier to develop apps, which obviously results in better apps and more apps.
100%. Apps are obviously we're going off piece slightly, but apps are obviously the prominent thing right now as to how we absorb all of our content as users at scale, right? What do you think is happening in the mobile space or that ecosystem collectively that, let's just say, others in engineering might not understand, comprehend, or appreciate?
So I think more and more companies realize how important it is to be available as an application, if you know what I mean. And there's always, this is quite a broad topic. You can look at it in many ways, but I feel like lately, if you want to create an idea, it needs to solve time instead of solve a problem, because all the problems are kind of solved. And solving time is easy with an app because it's at hand, right? You got your mobile phone right here. And to solve that is by creating an app, where many companies think like, let's create a web app so we're much faster available on mobile. And, I don't want to go that route completely, but then often you come back to that decision and you want to create a native application. But I think the general answer is that, you need to be available on mobile if you are a serious product company in many ways.
1,000%. 1,000%. So talk to us a little bit about Swift UI then. So that introduction to obviously using that suite, if you like, help us understand the decision making behind that. You've obviously given it some pros, what it can replace, but just help us understand that. If people were making that decision right now, listening, just give us some of that detail.
Yeah, it's quite a big decision, right? You're building apps, at least in our case, we were building apps for 2 or 3 years with UIKit. And then suddenly there is a big new product launching to develop UI with, called Swift UI. there's a learning curve to it. It's
Yeah.
not stable. At least it was introduced in iOS 13, and the first 4 iOS versions were really unstable, and you couldn't really rely on it. On top of that, many features didn't even exist in SwiftUI. So there was a certain decision making to it where you couldn't just build everything in SwiftUI because it was simply not possible.
Yeah.
Or it would return the classic 80-20% story where, the first 80% goes really fast. But then you want to do the details, and that's like 20%
Yeah.
of your time. That takes the longest time of development.
Yeah.
So what we decided at the moment of adopting it was quite fast. We always try to stay on top of latest technologies just because, in a few years it will be the main technology.
Yeah.
And if you don't start adopting it today,
Yeah.
you'll be behind pretty soon. So what we did at WeTransfer as a tryout, we replaced the introduction screen. And for app versions that didn't support iOS 13, we would just fall back to the old introduction screens.
Yeah.
Which was kind of a nice way to try it out as a team. Like, how fast do we develop? Can we develop the things that we want to develop? What is it for us? Does it work the way we expect it to work? And yeah, it turned out that, it gave us quite some insights that for simple screens, it was much faster and it kind of worked pretty nicely. And fast forward to today, we're at iOS 15 now. It's much more mature. So all the new fields that we develop, I think most of the fields in the new transfer app are all using SwiftUI, simply because, you don't want to write legacy code today, right? If you write your fields right now, not with SwiftUI, you want to revisit it in a few years.
Yeah, nice. Okay, I'm going to touch back on your previous point because you make a really good point about being, a native application or mobile application. If you want to be a serious product company, how do you think mobile should sit in and around, engineering in other areas? Let's just say back-end infrastructure, etc. Because if you have users at scale, let's tie that to WeTransfer. Thousands of people will be file sharing. You need some smart engineering across both sides. So what does that relationship look like? Are you embedded in, let's just say feature teams or product teams, or is there a separate team, and what does that relationship look like or should look like in your opinion?
Yeah, I think this is totally dependent on how big your company is, right? Um, I think for us at WeTransfer, we're slowly moving towards where before we had like a mobile team just for collect. Now we have a mobile team for 2 apps.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be very weird if I'm building like a login feature in collect, and then we have another team for the transfer app that's also building the login feature, right? So how it works for us, because we're getting bigger and bigger, we get feature teams like you mentioned, where you get like a bundle of knowledge that just knows best what to do and build it into the many apps, where it's really important to set up both apps in a way that it's kind of known to each engineer. So the development structure should be consistent.
Nice.
Though, if you look at a smaller company, I can totally see that company having less engineers. So you need to make different decisions, and that one engineer could be all over the place, right? So I think the ideal situation is to just make sure that you reuse knowledge as much as possible in a way.
Yeah, nice. Okay, talk to us a little bit about your community. Then I'm keen to understand a little bit about your work, your involvement in the community, maybe open sourcing, talking to people. Help us understand that and the work that you do.
Yeah, to give some context for the ones that aren't aware of the Swift community, I started blogging in 2015, and I really started serious blogging in 2018, where I started writing an article every week ever since.
Mm-hmm.
So I got around 200 articles right now, and people just know that I'm releasing a new article every week.
Yeah.
And what it does by creating consistency is that you really create awareness in the community. people want to follow you because they know there's value in it, because you'll deliver a new article next week as well. People ask me like, why do you do it? But I feel like as an engineer, you need to stay on top of new features. You need to get to understand how Swift UI works, or how that new Swift technique works. And the way it works for me is that I dive into that topic and I write it down in an article.
Yep.
So it's kind of building up my own personal knowledge base. And, I need to do that, but other engineers do that too. And I just make it a win-win by writing it down in an article. But yeah, the community is super active. There's a lot of open source packages available. It's quite popular as well to open source frameworks. There is lately some discussion about it because there are some people that, they open source their application. Other people's copied that code and just released the same app under a different name, which is kind of like a bad impression for open sourcing code. It's quite rude to do so, but yeah, it happens. But yeah, in general, I would say the Swift community is very active, very helpful, open to answer any questions and help people improve app development.
Good. Okay. What do you think's to come in the mobile space, or Swift space, or iOS space? What do you see happening, or what do you think the community needs? Let's say whether it is features, whether it is in the language itself.
Yeah, the biggest frustration, I think, is build times. If you look at the latest MacBook releases, the one thing iOS engineers were looking at were benchmarks. There are open source repositories with a certain Xcode project which you can check out and then build on your machine and add it to a certain benchmark table where you can see all the build times. The problem is many big projects, clean builds take about 1 minute. That's quite a lot of time.
Okay.
So imagine, web development, you change something and it works, right? Most often the time. The turnaround is much, much quicker. Imagine that works too for app development. That would be a big, big productivity improvement. So, I always answer this question, like, what do you want at
build
the
times?
next step? Yeah, build time improvements. Yeah.
Okay. When could that change, or how does that change actually happen? For someone doesn't know maybe what happens behind open sourcing or introduction to new features in languages, how does that change actually take place? Is it listening to the community and implementing it, or is it just a case of there are bounds to what the language can do because it probably ties in with other things that it does do well?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly the Swift compiler. So to give you a bit of history, right? We had Objective-C back in the days, which was just super fast. You press build, and in my memories, it was basically instant. I think it's different, but let's take that as an example. Then Swift was introduced, where at first we didn't even have incremental building, right? So the first version of Swift, the bigger your project got, the slower build times got. And, you were often just writing features without building in the meantime and just build once and hope that it all worked. That improved over years. But I feel like, every time we gain build performance, then Swift becomes more complex and build performance goes a bit down again. But yeah, Swift is a young language, right? So it was introduced in 2014, if I remember correctly, which is super young. It got many, many great techniques reused from many different languages. But yeah, they're also still inventing themselves. But yeah, how does it work? When do we get updates? So Xcode is updated regularly. But the biggest improvements take place at WWDC, the worldwide conference of Apple, where they release a major version of Xcode. And that often contains a section in build times have been improved, 2 times faster build times. And that's often the moment that the so-called sheeps in the audience start clapping a lot.
Do they?
And,
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate it's a different OS, it's a different ecosystem in itself. Are there a lot of challenges in the Android space that you're aware of that are quite similar in terms of build times? Is there quite a lot of crossover between the two environments, or Is there a lot that you're unaware of that you probably can't have too much of an opinion on?
Well, the last thing I remember in this regards is that I saw build times on CI for Android being much, much, much faster.
Were they?
Yeah, but I've got no clue about the technical details in that regard. But what I do know is like we have Swift UI and Android has Jetpack Compose, right? So they're also working on what's like a new way of building UI. They have Kotlin, which is their new language, where we have Swift, and it's quite popular to look at like how is Android compared to iOS, right? Because in a way, it's kind of odd that we build the same app twice. We have two development teams for kind of like the same outcoming product, but it just looks a bit different. So there's a lot of value in looking at like how can we share code, like Kotlin for Swift or Swift for Kotlin. How do we make like a business layer that can work with both languages? I think that's going to be a big topic in the upcoming years where we will be able to share code between platforms more.
Do you think there will be?
They're already working on it. And not even only between Android and iOS, right? So there's Swift Assembly, if I recall it correctly, for building web applications with Swift.
Okay.
There's Swift on the server, which is being adopted by some bigger companies as well. I think there's Amazon is supporting it quite a bit. There are just quite some things going on in that space, and it's young, so it's not mature yet. Mm-hmm. But with latest Swift release, introducing async await, which is quite a big release for Swift on the server, slowly but slowly, these services become better. And if you think about it, I think Chris Ladner, the main developer behind Swift, world domination is what he said. And if you think about it, Swift is becoming more and more mature and available on multiple platforms. Maybe in the future we will only develop products with Swift.
Okay, so that's quite an interesting move. So Swift Assembly. I don't know if there's actually a name for Swift for Server. So Amazon have adopted some of that. Do you think that's a smart move for companies, let's just say a startup, to adopt something like that? One environment where you run everything from, is that risk?
I mean, it's a young language, right? It's heavily used in app development. On the server, it's becoming more and more popular.
Okay.
But there was also IBM stepping out of it, which kind of like gave a bad impression to the community, where it's not really fair because Swift on the server is really improving a lot. I mean, if we as WeTransfer had to decide whether we would build our server-side code with Swift, we wouldn't do it because it's not mature yet. It's a risk in many ways. So as a company, you wouldn't directly do it. But as a company like Amazon providing services, that's not really that risk, if you know what I mean. So I think it depends a bit, but think about the advantage, right? If you were to be a small company, you can build your app with Swift and you can build your server with Swift. If you have an iOS app only, or maybe a Mac app on the side of it, you only have one language to maintain, a Swift language. So you only have to hire on one language. You build up knowledge in a team that you can share across multiple platforms in your backend team and your front-end team. Maybe when the backender is on a holiday, the front-ender, which normally does app development, can still do backend work because it's Swift. And maybe there's not even a backender anymore. Maybe there's a feature team that does both backend and front-end.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, it could be super interesting what that brings. But it's a battle whether it will be Swift. Maybe it will be Kotlin. I'm not sure. I'm not as aware of how Kotlin improves as I am with Swift. But it's an interesting move.
Well, the hiring part, you make a good point, because I think hiring in the mobile space, we talk about the relatively new nature that Swift, if you want to double down on the language, it is to hire for, or if you look at engineering concepts or how people approach problems. I'd be quite interested to understand your thoughts around hiring and maybe what you optimize for when looking at engineers coming into your team. We can talk a little bit about if WeTransfer are hiring and what you're hiring for, but that would be useful to understand what you look for.
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Hiring is always very difficult in many ways. How do you determine whether somebody is good enough, somebody fitting in the team? And it's a super heated market, especially if you look at the past years with COVID. There's no location bounding anymore. So
Yeah,
the salaries that you used to get only in the States, for example, suddenly are available everywhere, which means that the market is even more heated.
yeah,
Um, so would that mean that you suddenly need to hire somebody that might not have been going through uh, before, but now there's no big batch of engineers, so you're a bit more easy. Um, yeah, if I look at WeTransfer, we've been hiring iOS devs lately quite a bit. There's a big value into being active in the community because many people came through Swiftly through my blog, which helped a lot. But it doesn't mean that we have quite an important process in place where we don't do like code challenges intensively. We really try to test the person based on what we think he needs to do.
okay,
There's no need to do a difficult coding task if you're not going to do it in your day-to-day job, right?
yeah,
Um, for us, it's much more important to get to know the person by character. Like, is he speaking out loud? Is he telling what he's doing? Is he aware that he's not good at a certain skill, which tells that if he's aware, he's able to improve. And I like to recall once my manager said once, we're trying to look for a 6 that's possibly becoming an 8, right? So we're looking for that potential, and if it's a person that fits in our team, then that's already like 2 steps towards the right direction.
self-awareness, I think, is the bit that I pick up on there, that I think is really important, that I see across I see across engineering as a whole. I don't play too much in the mobile space, but across, let's just say, back end, infra, front end, I think there is there are a lot of companies and people that optimize for a specific language. But I think if you actually take a step back, and I've said this a couple of times on the pod, if you take a step back and look at problem solving capabilities, if you maybe go through a system design of something that is in your stack that is a challenge that you're currently facing, i.e., the day to day, or the self awareness part of maybe running through that system design saying, I'm not strong at this, I don't know this. I think that's probably a lot more valuable, or I see that more now being a lot more valuable than someone coming in acing things technically, because everyone is probably looking to hire those people. It becomes a lot more competitive at that technical, let's just say 90 to 100%, rather than let's just use your 60% to 80%. But that self-awareness, that humbleness, I think that's really, really, really important right now, that a lot of people are looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. And in general, right? Like being honest in the team, being self-aware, those are super important skills. Yesterday, I had a pair programming session with one of my colleagues, and he needed to get answers to continue in his task, right? And I told him honestly, like I'm not the person to do pair programming because it's valuable time to me. So let's get to the point. I'll give you the pointers you need to move on instead of moving the code that you will do either way where I'm looking at, like that's valuable time that you take away from me.
Yeah.
But being honest at that point, telling him that how I feel about it, instead of just accepting that he does it there, you need to spend more time in that pair programming session. I think that's super important to get to know each other and get better in working together in a team.
Nice, good. Before we wrap up, just as a double down, Swift UI, you've obviously introduced it. You're obviously very happy with it. Just as a pure reminder for mobile teams, mobile engineers looking to introduce new technologies and the strengths that it gives you, just double down on some of those points again as a refresher.
Yeah, I think the most important part is that you want to prevent your code becoming legacy today already by using UIKit instead of Swift UI. I think for hiring it helps as well, because you're using the newest technologies, which is always super interesting for new engineers. And yeah, why not move with the newest features and benefit from what it brings? It gives you what you see is what you get with a real-time editor showing the views without having to build. There's many advantages there, and you don't have to write all your views or rewrite all your views today. You can do it progressively if you want.
Good. And get these build times down as well.
I really hope so, yeah.
Okay. It would be really good to keep tabs on how Swift evolves as a language. I've learned that today. A little bit more on Swift assembly, Swift for server. I don't know if there's actually a name for that, but it will be really interesting to see how that evolves. I can see how that will be attractive, like you say, for startups. So I'm going to keep an eye on that and see where we move in that space. You're talking about WeTransfer. You're hiring engineers at the moment. Do you want to give us an idea as to what you're hiring for, maybe a hiring process? Because people listening, they're going to be interested or might be interested in WeTransfer, might use your product, might have used Collect before. So just give us an idea on what you're hiring for. We'll have some links below so people can check this out, and we'll have your blog below as well. Hopefully get you some more views on that. But just give us some visibility on what you're hiring for.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, we're hiring on many places, right? So there's obviously not only Swift engineers listening to us right now, I think. But yeah, for the iOS team, we only have one position left, so you better be fast to grab that if you want to work with me on the latest technologies on app development. But yeah, we hire backenders, front-enders, designers as well. Many different positions, and I can't tell you what we're working on at WeTransfer, but I can tell you that it's going to be an exciting time, what we're going to deliver soon. So, there's no better time than joining today.
Love it. For everyone listening, get following Antoine. Blogs below. He's given you a little bit of an insight into his journey over the last 4 or 5 years, introduction of Collect, already being in play, and how they've moved some of their stack to Swift UI, strengths of Swift UI as well. Hopefully we've got some cross sharing to come with Android and Kotlin. I think that'd be quite nice. Let's get the build times down. And it's been an absolute pleasure. Hopefully we can get some more people orbiting your community, and hopefully we get you some new joiners as well. But thanks for coming to share about WeTransfer and all the good work that you guys are doing.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me over. This was a super fun chat. Looking forward to do it again in 4 years and talk about the better build times we have.
Yeah, let's roll on a year. I'll give you a call.
Sounds good. Antoine, good. Looking forward.
Thanks, mate. I'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this episode. Massively appreciate you listening and checking in with us. If you want to find out more about us and what we're doing, please check us out on social media. What we're trying to do at Enginears is build a community to drive knowledge sharing and experiences. On Twitter, we can be found Enginears.io. It's no_. We've also got a website, which is enginears.io. These links will all be posted in the description. Any feedback and comments are massively appreciated. We're always looking to improve on where we can. Thanks, guys.